Miriam Meets on RTE Radio 1 with Miriam O'Callaghan.
Hello there. My guests this week are a father and daughter, both filmmakers. Kirsten Sheridan is from Dublin and is currently editing her third film, Dollhouse. Her previous films, Disco Pigs and August Rush, were critically acclaimed, and she was nominated for a Writer's Oscar for the film In America, a film she co-wrote with her sister Naomi and her dad Jim. Next week, starting on February the 3rd, the Irish Film Institute will celebrate the career of Jim Sheridan with a special season of his films called Jim Sheridan in Focus. The films include In America, The Field, In the Name of the Father, Some Mother's Son, and of course, My Left Foot. You're both very welcome here today.
Thanks.
And also with you, of course, Kirsten, is your 6-week-old son, Frankie.
Yeah, that's right.
He's really good, actually.
Yeah, so far.
Are you a good granddad, Jim?
I think so. I mean, she scares me, Kirsten, you know. She decides, like, she'll have the kids at home and no anaesthetic, and I'm like, my nerves are gone. And this the third time she did it. And every time she said, I couldn't go through that again.
He's a beautiful baby. I have to say, he looks at 6 weeks very like you, Jim. Like
most children at 6 weeks look like me.
I know, he's gorgeous now. When you were growing up, Kirsten, you're one of 3 girls, aren't you?
Yeah.
You the middle girl?
Yeah.
What kind of a dad was he?
Quite mad. You know, we used to always go to the shops in our pyjamas and go for breakfast in diners in our pyjamas and kind of odd things like that. And, you know, it was quite a kind of mad, I suppose, bohemian kind of all over the place circus in some ways, you know, I suppose moving to America and all the people that used to hang around and down in the theatre. We spent a lot of time down in the theatre. All the mad actors and my dad kind of the ringleader of the mad circus in a way.
Because were you born here or in America? Like at what age did you go to America?
I went when I was 5 until 12.
So do you have any memories before 5 here?
Yeah. And I suppose they would have been a bit more, you know, normal in a way. You know, your granny's house on a Sunday and running around with kids playing kick the can and all that kind of stuff. And then suddenly in the middle of Hell's Kitchen with loads of druggies.
When you made the decision, Jim, to go to America with 3 obviously young little girls, did you have 3 at that stage? 2, and then the third was born there. It must have been a big decision. Just forget about the career in terms of the children. Was it moving them away from, I suppose, grannies and things?
I don't know if we really thought it through like that. You know, I think kind of in a way it was like, well, let's go and see what it's like, you know. We actually went to Toronto first, freezing it was. And we drove across the American border then and got arrested, remember that? Mm-hmm. Kirsten was in the back of the car. We were arrested for speeding. I wasn't doing the speeding, but Fran was. But the roads were great and we just thought we'd get there faster, and the cops beeped us and we waved at them, hello. And they followed us like for an hour and couldn't catch us, and then they were mad and they took us to a midnight court.
What?
And this judge came out in his slippers. I think they woke him up and he was mad. And he didn't really want to go through with it, and he fined me $40. And I didn't have the $40, and he said, well, give us a credit card. And I was like, what's that? And he's like, you don't have a credit card? No. What about a check? What? No. And he's like, how are you going to survive in America? We literally had, we hadn't got the $40 to pay him. So we gave them like $35 in cash and lots of coins that made up about $3. And then he said he wanted the $2 and, you know, or else he'd put us in jail. And one of the cops put down $2 in quarters, I think. And the judge said to me, did you put that down? And I said, no. Thinking, like, is he trying to get me for perjury?
Yeah.
And one of the cops said he did. I saw him. Like, I think the judge was saying, like, you idiots, I'm going to make you perjure yourself just because you woke me up. And they said, okay. And then we went outside and the cops started saying, you know, we're sorry we arrested you and all. Our granny was from Killarney and, you know, all this.
Oh, so they were trying to be real nice.
They were in the end. They gave us $10 for gas.
For the toll.
For the toll. How old were you then about, Kirsten?
5, yeah.
But you remember that?
I remember waking up and seeing the same stuff. Oh, I thought we were going in circles because I'd wake up and there'd be McDonald's, JCPenney, Howard John, every time, you know, and I was going, we're going in circles. We're not getting anywhere, you know. But we were on the way to New York.
I remember when we got there, we went into a restaurant with Malachi McCourt and maybe, I think Frank came in as well. And we sat down and we asked Naomi what she wanted, and she said lobster. And And Kirsten just ran round the restaurant because she'd been in the car for like 8 hours for about an hour, just in a circle.
Yeah, but doing the same ever since.
What was she like as a little girl?
Full of energy, full of courage. The quality most needed for an artist is courage, I think. That's what James Joyce said anyway.
When you were in New York for the first time, were you worried, Jim, about like the neighbourhoods you moved into and stuff, bringing up little girls?
Not really, you know. I mean, I know
Should
it sounds...
you have been?
No, probably not. You know, I'd have grown up in these mad schools in mad Sheriff Street, and the people there were solid, but there was a lot of craziness around, especially within the church and within the whole attitude. And I thought New York would be a liberation, you know. There's nothing wrong with a transvestite to me, you know what I mean? I mean, I didn't give a course. It was like they used to go down. I actually put it in America, and I remember they went down to get ice cream from Mr. Whippy or whatever he was called. Naomi was getting it, was she?
Like the guy who comes around in the van?
Yeah, and there were 2 trannies there trying to get ice cream as well, you know, and she was saying... How was it?
You know, we got the money to get the ice cream from the bum. We were like, the bum has given us money. Jesus Christ.
What a nice guy.
Yeah, he was a nice guy.
No, he was a guy that used to sit outside the store, you know, and I'd go to work and I'd give him like 50 cents or whatever I had. And then he upped it to $1. Like, he didn't want coins. And then he didn't see me for a week, and he said, "Hey, mister, you owe me $7. I haven't seen you for a week." So he did give his money back.
And food stamps.
Kirsten, do you remember New York at that time when you were very young? What was school like? I mean, did you like it?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. You know, I mean, on the first day, you realise, you know, everyone's slagging your accent and they're saying, say carrot, say water. You feel like a performing monkey, you know. And then, so the second day, you've got an American accent down, you know.
No more slagging.
Like, that's it, yeah. So I suppose when you're 5, you know, I think you can adapt very quick, you know. And
remind me, did you work in the Irish Arts Centre out there?
Yeah.
And did you know you'd have that job before you went out there, Jim?
You know, I had raised a little bit of money here to kind of contribute to what I was doing in the Irish Arts Centre. So I think I had money coming to keep me going for a little bit in the Irish Arts Centre. It was like a crazy thing. We used to do raffles and make a few dollars. It was, you know, not like a regular job or anything, you know.
And what went on in it?
Craziness, you know, like it was called on Clive Sullish, the Sword of Light, when I got there. And the theatre was called the Irish Rebel Theatre. And there was a big row because I wanted to change the name, you know. I said, I hate that name, the Rebel Theatre. And they're like, why? And I'm like, rebels don't announce themselves, you know. And so there was a big row and we changed it. But they used to do dance classes and music classes on ending Bowrons being hit, you know. Like, people learning the Bowron. Like, I have nothing against the Bowron, but when you hear it being learned for 5 years, you kind of...
And at that time when you went, what year are you talking about now, roughly?
81 too.
81. So when you went there, would it have been a lot of sad Irish Americans who were dreaming of home and were trying to make it very like home? What was it like, the Irish Arts Centre?
Oh, no, the Irish Arts, no, that was Americans, you know, a few generations Americans who are much more politically nationalistic than Irish people are. And the people who were coming were all in the Bronx. We lived in Midtown Manhattan. We didn't live with the Irish. The people, like Terry George lived up in the Bronx in like Woodhaven or somewhere. And they were all new kids who were from Ireland who were working on building sites, illegal aliens. You know, it was very interesting times.
When you were little and in America and your dad was involved in that art centre, is that where you think you got your initial love for the arts? Was it exciting that your dad did that kind of thing?
I don't even think we knew it was at the time. It's only when you look back, like at the time you're kind of going, I want to be the same as everyone else. I want to fit in, you know. I want to just, you know, like have carpet on the floor and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Not have food stamps. But that's just, I think, all kids, you know. And then when you look back, you go, God, it was actually kind of a mad, eclectic, kind of crazy lifestyle that I suppose had a completely different perspective and probably opened our eyes a bit, you know. But at the time, we were just flying around this mad art centre doing tap dance lessons and that kind of thing.
And for you, I know a lot of people do know, but for people who don't know, Jim, it was a big decision to go to America, wasn't it? Because you were involved here in the Project Arts Centre, weren't you?
Yeah.
With your brother and stuff. Why did you go? Did you go because you got sick of Ireland, or did you go because you wanted an adventure?
I think I got sick of Ireland at the time. I think that's what... I had been through a lot of stress in the Project Art Centre, and I decided I'd have to leave Ireland, and I didn't think I should go to England. I didn't think it was very accommodating, really, to Irish artists at the time, you know. I mean, there was a lot of political trouble in that. And I didn't really know French, so, you know.
That wasn't an option.
Yeah. But, like, I mean, the Irish, the people from the Pale, whether it's, you know, Joyce or Beckett, or people like that, would go to France. But the people from outside the Pale basically went to America.
But can you remember the day you came home to your wife, Fran, and said, we're going, and we're going to take our 2 little girls, and what she said to you?
Oh, she was delighted, Fran. She was like, great. And then when we drove the car into Manhattan, it was like, oh, there's Manhattan, great. Look, it's huge, it's great, freedom. Nobody will know you, you know, it's great. I don't think there was a sense. It was a sense of adventure.
Yeah, exciting.
We didn't live it like, you know, we're making a big decision. I think it was a big decision, you know.
Do you remember the excitement of being told you were going to America?
I don't remember being told, but I do remember getting there, you know. And I suppose, like my dad says, you know, if your parents are freaked out or going, oh, this is actually a dodgy neighbourhood, but they were completely fine with everything. So that just kind of transferred to us, you know, by osmosis, I suppose, you know. So we were never worried or thinking this is a kip, or, you know, we're going to be knifed or anything like that, you know. And you wouldn't be anyway, I don't think.
Not once you're within the community, no.
No.
And of course, your third daughter, Tess, was born there, wasn't she, Jim?
That's a funny story.
Yeah, Tess was premature. It was weird. I never knew whether it was caused because there was a guy in the thrift store down below. Remember the thrift store?
What's a thrift store?
A thrift store is a store where you sell second-hand clothes and, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't think things went well at Christmas. And the thrift store just caught fire. And the kids were in the house, and they were looking out, and people were waving up at them, and they were waving back. But actually, people were saying, "Get out of the house!" And Fran, you know, grabbed them, and I think when she went out the door, and the smoke just went, and you couldn't see anything, and she lost your hand or something.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
she got terrible fright, probably.
And she was trying to catch Kirsten's hand, and she caught her. And meanwhile, Naomi went whoomp, like 100 miles an hour. And I was coming up the street when I saw the door on fire and Naomi coming flying out. And as I went towards it, Fran and Kirsten came out, you know, 20 seconds later. And I think it may have caused Fran to have Tess prematurely. I don't know. But she was in an incubator for like 10 days or something.
Which was expensive.
It was expensive.
You remember it as funny when your mum was going into labour, don't you, Kirsten?
Well, I don't know. Well, I suppose when she said go on down to the Irish Arts Centre and tell your dad, but, you know, being my mum, who's quite mad, she said, don't tell him until after the show, because he was standing in for someone who was sick, and he was paying like someone who was 60, and he had all the white makeup on, and he had no wedding ring, which I remember really clearly. So then when we all flew up to the hospital, which was in Harlem, they looked at him going, you're the father, like you're, you know, and, you know, you look like you're 65 and he's no wedding ring, and, you know, the social security number was always the telephone number, and, you know, so Tess was born, and yeah, she was 10 days in the incubator, and it's so expensive over there. But my mum sent a thank you note to the nurse. That's a real thing my mum would do. It's a real Irish thing, and the nurse had never gotten one in her entire career, and she was so moved by it that she found a once-off emergency fund and wrote off the like 10-20 grand we owed for the incubator for the 10 days, you know.
That's so lovely.
So yeah, there was a lot of kind of mad stories like that were very welcoming.
I think it's the thing about America is that they put out a lot of bad press about like the medical services and this because they'd be overwhelmed if they didn't, you know. But underneath it, generally, the people are, it's true in New York as well, the people are kind and supportive and cooperative, you know. Really, New York is the most cooperative place you ever will live.
And exciting. First piece of music, and you didn't want to tell your dad what this is.
I'm not sure if he remembers. This was kind of odd. Before I had my first kid, Layla, I got a message on my phone from my dad, and he was just singing this song down the phone, which is a Bob Dylan song called Forever Young. And I didn't know what possessed him to call me up out of the blue and sing it down the phone, but he did, so I thought it was kind of cool.
Why did you sing that to her?
It's just a poem. It's a hymn. It's a love song, you know. It's like, I don't know. Probably.
Maybe you just found out I was pregnant.
Maybe, yeah. I love that song. It's a great song.
Bob Dylan there singing Forever Young. Jim, you grew up, of course, in Sheriff Street and all of that. Because you both have ended up filmmakers, obviously, Kirsten, you would have got it from your dad, but where did you get it from?
God, I don't know.
Your dad?
Yeah, my dad was like character, you know. He did everything for the community. I meet people like who tell me, your dad brought me swimming. Remember, your dad brought me to the Young Olympics, for some mad things, you know, and or he would run the plan given for the church, you know, and he would run the plan given. He would take the kids out swimming. He'd play them with the basketball. He'd do the community games. He would work at the dogs at night. He would work in CIE during the day, and he'd get the ladders out at the weekend.
So he was just unbelievably hard-working.
Yeah. My big memory is him putting up a TV aerial trying to get the signal from the east. And he's like, we have to turn this east. And I'm like, really annoyed at him. Because, like, where's your compass? Because he used to annoy me. Could never do anything right, you know. So I'd be like, east, I don't know where the east is, Dad. Where is it? And he'd be like, where the Liffey goes. And the Liffey go effing east out to feckin' England. And I'm like, no, the Liffey goes in a circle. He'd say, turn her east. So we're turned the early east, and it's freezing. And then he said, you can't get out. And he's shouting down to Peter, probably, what's snow. So let's try southeast Harlech. So we're trying Harlech for. And then my Uncle Jim, God bless him, who was a sweet, sweet man, worked for Pie Television. He came up on the roof and he had the compass, he had everything. He was expert in it. And he said, oh, I see it now. He said, the signal's coming due east. He said, and it's hitting that church there. And the church is blocking the signal. He said, so you're in the shadow of the church. And it's always been in my mind, that story. Like, as a kid, it made such an impression on me, because I suppose the churches were our skyscrapers, and we were in the shadow of the church, and the signal was bouncing. But the power of the television constantly coming, the power of the church just diminished, because the new pulpit was the TV. And I think me and Neil Jordan came out of that. You know, we were the first generation kids who saw telly, you know? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Neil was very visual. And I think my kind of expertise was more emotional. I tell this story about Frankie, he had a brain tumor and he died, but I took him to the pictures, and I remember it was a smile. I thought I brought him to the pictures because I was a nice kid, and actually I think deep down it was like a survival thing, a DNA thing of like, I know there's something wrong with this kid, and I kept watching him, and his smile was odd, and within a week his motor functions didn't work, so the tumour was pressing on the motor functions.
How old was Frankie?
He was 10 then.
And how old were you?
I was 17. But the interesting thing from acting, I don't want to get sentimental over it, it's just from an acting point of view, it's kind of like, that's what it's like when people go into acting. They kind of want to reduce their character, you know what I mean, reduce themselves. So I always think like all the director needs to do was walk into a room and make people live. Mm. It's really simple, you know. You're standing in front of people, you're going to record it forever, hopefully for a long time. I always get a bit melancholy, and I think, well, in X amount of time, they'll be just like all the people in the black and white movies, dead. And now that they're alive in front of me, I should let them live authentically.
But without getting sentimental, I mean, I've heard you and read a lot about you, and the death of your brother is one of those defining moments in people's lives. It definitely is in your life, Jim, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. I think in all of our families' lives, but it's like I think it's just such a shock to the system, I remember telling somebody that around that time, I think I made a secret deal with God that if he kept Frankie alive, I'd never sin again, which was a failure. And I think it's kind of like you're utterly convinced that you have a direct line to God and he's going to keep the kid alive. You're utterly convinced. And then the impossibility of purity and not committing a sin used to overwhelm me,
Did it change you as a person aged 17?
I think there was a fundamental shift occurred, that's very hard to define what it's like. It's like you grow up very quickly and you're watching your parents kind of from a totally different perspective. It's like they're vulnerable, they're upset, and they might say something that's really well-intentioned, like, you are his favourite, but you take it as, like, what's that mean? It's like, so it reverses everything for a while, The
strange thing about life is that was that about 50 years ago when he died?
Yeah.
But the loss, watching you now, genuinely, seems as painful as it was then.
Emma Thompson was on In the Name of the Father, and I remember she was a bit down, and then years later I found out that she suffered from depression, and she says that if she had been able to go through her father's death, he rang Blue Peter on the telly, and that she would have been, if she had grieved, she'd have been okay. And I think it's something like that. There was no people, we weren't allowed to grieve. Do you know what I mean? So it stays with you, and it's probably a thing that helps in creativity, but I think it also stifles it in a way, It's I became fascinated just with artists who had dead brothers like Terry Malick, and I can tell them immediately, kind of in a weird way.
Really?
But you should talk. I feel
No, was the Van Gogh?
but it's Van Gogh's letters are amazing and really intellectual and really smart. And he had a brother called Vincent who died a year to the day on which he was born. So his whole thing was like, he always wanted to be the dead brother, because the mother, it was obvious she was in love with the dead brother. That's a condition of it too, that my mum, though, was a very powerful peasant, and I know my cousins will go crazy if I say that, but I don't mean it in a bad way. But she was born and her mother died the day she was born. So she had this very powerful personality, but you could always see that in her. I could always see it.
Growing up, Kirsten, because your new little baby who's here with you today is called Frankie.
Yes.
So was it something you were always aware of with your father, the death of his brother Frankie?
Yeah, definitely, and I suppose over the years, it does come back up in my dad and in Peter's work, as I suppose the moment that my grandfather kind of took communication onto another level, So, my dad has talked about before, my granddad communicating on the stage instead of at home, and that was kind of, I think, the first time that happened was after he died, right?
Yeah. I wrote a film about, I haven't made it, but I should, kind of bits out of Peter's book and bits out of my own life, and there's a scene in it where my dad's casting the play, and he's like, okay, Tina will play the mother. Now Tina's 17. I'll play the Captain Boyle, and you'll play Johnny Boyle. And Mrs. Thing from across the road is like, Tina's a year younger than him. It doesn't matter. That's the way it is. So my dad played my father in the play, and I played the son, and Uncle Jim came and said that I was like an antichrist on stage. I got to get out all the anger at my dad on stage.
When did you decide to become a director, Kirsten?
I don't know if you have a moment as such, but I suppose probably on the set of My Left Foot would have been would have made a big impact, because it was suddenly like a family. And the theatre had that, but it was so intense on the set of My Left Foot, and especially with Daniel and wheeling him around in the wheelchair and him eating his lunch, he never left character and all of that, so you'd be feeding him.
You fed him, didn't you?
Yeah, we all would be, yeah. So that kind of blur between reality and fantasy was always a bit odd in her.
But Kirsten, I think, I was always a bit... I thought Kirsten should have been an actor, She was a great actress. But she's never wanted to do it. She's making faces there.
No, did you not think you'd be a good actor?
No.
She just wanted to be a director, control freak like her dad.
Yeah.
Did you worry becoming a director that you'd be compared to your father, or people would say, oh, you're just a director because your dad's a director?
No. To be honest. There's so much of that stuff that if you actually thought about it or gave it any oxygen, I don't think you'd get out of bed in the morning, What I learned from my dad most on set is the opposite of all of that. It's all about being vulnerable and being honest and being human and not pretending you're the director and not, pretending you have all the answers. And so seeing how my dad is on set, where there's no judgment and there's no line between, dad at home, dad on set, dad in a taxi, is the same person all the time, So seeing that, I suppose, was... and seeing it working with the actors, where you go, I haven't a clue, what do you think? And I don't have all the answers. And
do you do anything differently from him?
I did, and as I get older, I think I'm starting to do it kind of the same, actually, and it's probably about a lack of fear and just getting your confidence, as a person, or figuring out who you are as you get older, because I would have been much more controlled in the past and, wrote scripts and then executed them and did storyboards and had it all, plotted out before I got on set. And now the latest film I did was the complete opposite of that. There was no script. It was complete chaos, and I absolutely loved it, so I think that might be the way forward.
You're both based in Dublin now, right? For someone like you who makes films, both of you, but you, Kirsten, is it difficult if you're not somewhere like Hollywood? I mean, do you need to be in America a lot, or is it okay to be in Dublin?
I think you it depends on what you want, and what you personally call success, I suppose. If you want the whole Hollywood thing, then you have to be there, yeah. It's that simple, probably. But, I suppose you look at Irish cinema and you realise you have to make something completely personal to yourself, and then then it can be called an Irish film or whatever, but I don't like the idea of going to America and emulating a different culture. I don't think it's something my dad ever done, and he has had so much success, like he in America was about an Irish family going to America. So it's not stepping outside your own skin. So depends which way you do that, but the story can be completely universal, even if it's in Sheriff Street or wherever.
When you had all the success, I suppose the huge success, Jim, with My Left Foot, but also films, so many of them, but In the Name of the Father, for instance, did you ever think of going to live back in America full time?
Well, I only came back to do My Left Foot, and then I stayed here to do The Field, and then I stayed here to do In the Name of the Father, and then I was here. It kind of happened like that, Sometimes I think I should have gone back and did a bit more in Hollywood or in America, It's you kind of tend to be out of the film culture when you're here, because there isn't really a culture for film here. I mean, there's a lot of people doing a lot of good work, but it's. And I'm not just talking about Ireland, I'm talking about England, anywhere else in the world. It's like there's America and everywhere else is the provinces in film. Do you know?
If you peak at something like My Left Foot, win all the Oscars, that unless you're willing to give up all of your life here and stay there and embed yourself in that Hollywood film life, it's difficult to reach those heights again.
It is. My Left Foot, a lot of people say your first movie is your best movie, and there's kind of truth to that. It may not be the best, but it's probably your most DNA movie,
There's nothing wrong with that, is there?
No, there's nothing wrong with that, no.
We're going to come back to talking about your career, but we're going to take the next piece of music, which is a piece you like, Kirsten, called When I Was Cool.
It's a piece I like because I've seen my dad, it's his party piece, seen him do it so often, and it's such a funny song, you know.
Okay, I know it's early, Jim, but since it's your favourite party piece, we have it anyway. Oscar Brown Jr. is going to sing it. Do you want to try a bit of it?
Yeah, I used to do it. I think I did it because it's kind of almost like a rap song, and you can speak it and you don't have to be a great singer. So I used to do it. I saw a kid out at Trinity College do it first in a club, the Five Club. But it's a funny song. It's like I've always lived by this golden rule.
Go.
Mid-Atlantic accent. Whatever happens, don't blow your cool. You gotta have nerves of steel and never show folks how you honestly feel. I've lived my whole life this way. Boom. For example, take yesterday. I breezed home happy, bringing her my pay. Her note read, "So long, Sappy, I've run away." I threw myself down across her empty bed, and this is what I said. Please don't do this to me. Please give me a break. I'm ready, please. But I was cool. That's what it's like.
Jim, you know when you have a movie like My Left Foot, which is so successful and wins Academy Awards, is there always in your career going to be one fine pinnacle, and trying to chase that level of success again is futile?
It's also like it's just like setting a bar, you know. It's like you just keep trying to jump higher, you know, or, you know, I think one of the good things in my career was that, you know, there was Neil Jordan, who I could always not be up against, but, you know, like, he broke the mould in making movies, you know, and I was both kind of like envious and had huge admiration at the same time. So
he drove you almost to be more successful, to aspire to his level.
I suppose initially then it's like, oh, if Neil can do it, I can try, you know, and then I did My Left Foot, and, you know, out of the blue, it was hugely just successful.
How important has Daniel Day-Lewis almost been to your success?
Daniel is an amazing actor. I suppose the thing that it shouldn't be forgotten was that My Left Foot was actually Noel Pearson's idea, and movies are ideas, you know. They're not scripts. They're not. They're just they're not even stories. They're an idea at the base of a story. So, like Francis Ford Coppola says that The Godfather is succession. You know, one word,
one
succession.
Idea, yeah.
And My Left Foot, you know, was whatever it came out in Noel, and we gave it to Daniel, and other actors had read it and didn't think, was like, what the hell is this? And then Daniel got it without a letter, without a note, and started reading it and thought it was amazing the first scene and just kept reading. And it was just an accident. And then he didn't mind having a first-time director. And me and him got on fantastically well and did 3 movies together. And he's a spellbinding actor who I'd love to do another movie with if we could find something.
You will.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
What would you say is the one word at the bottom of My Left Foot? You know what I mean? At the succession being The Godfather. What?
I think it's like, I was trying to think of it. I'll tell you, Kirsten, school to me was like the teachers knew nothing. The teachers in our school hadn't a clue. And one day the kid in front of me went missing, and came back the next day, and he'd gone up to an Alsatian dog with his nose and rubbed his nose on the Alsatian dog. The Alsatian thought it was funny twice, but the third time the Alsatian bit him. And he got the Irish version of plastic surgery, stitches everywhere, and came back into school. And the teacher saw his opportunity and got a tuning fork, and decided that was the day we were all going to sing. And the kid goes, no. And he made him do it like 9 times till the whole class was in hysterics. And then the next guy, and then me. And I went up. The teacher goes, ding, and I go, no. And they went into kinks of hysteria, laughing. And it was the first time I realised that, like, laughter is a muscle. Because after about the 15th time I went, oh, they just all stopped. The laugh was over. All together, all at once. And the teacher was, okay, go out to the line. And I went out, and the guy with the stitches said to me and you, Cheryl, what? And that empathy with somebody who can't speak, somebody who's disabled, it's like, it's the humanity through disability. Probably humanity. Probably, you know.
And at the moment, Kirsten, obviously you have little baby Frankie in your arms there at the moment, but you've teamed up with John Carney, haven't you? He of Once, and you're kind of...
Yeah. Myself and John Carney and another Irish director called Lance Daly got together to do this new idea called The Factory, which is... it's basically a collective of filmmakers and artists and lunatics, and again another crazy circus down in Ringsend on the docks. You know, we just have this big building, and we're trying to make it like a mini indie film studio.
And is that hard? Like, I suppose we all know, we don't need to remind ourselves, we're living in an Ireland of 2011 where there's no money for anything. You know, is it hard when you're talking about things like film and creativity to actually get people to commit any money to something like that?
You know, it's impossible like everything else, but I suppose at the end of the day, that's kind of why we started it, because it was all around the time of On Board Snippanua, and everyone thought, God, there might not be a film board, there might not be any money for the arts, and what are we going to do? And, you know, we're at a stage where equipment is so cheap. You know, you can get a small camera, you can get your actors, you can go and shoot it for 100 grand. And, you know, most of the success stories out of Ireland have been lower budget films like Once, you know, and even some of the documentaries, they're incredibly cheap to make. So I don't think the budget in any way equals the success rate or the quality, you know. So we just thought we'd have a very low budget kind of, you know, and that's how the Irish are seen abroad. We're seen, you know, as this kind of rough around the edges with a lot of heart. And so if the films are quite rough around the edges, but as long as they have a lot of heart, I think they actually, they connect with international audiences. So that's what we're trying to kind of push, very personal stories. And I suppose that comes from a lot of what my dad is saying about, you know, your own personal DNA and all the rest of it. And then that becomes a national thing. And
you talk about your father there and the own personal DNA. And there's a nice story I read, Jim, about your own dad in relation to In the Name of the Father, talking about fathers and DNA.
God, I think back to Ireland in the 70s, and I think about all the conflicts that went on with me and my dad, and the conflicts beyond the house, you know, and there was a lot of Oedipal rage, you know. So my dad was always the bad guy in the plays, you know, like Mobile Homes, which is on in this retrospective directed by Pat O'Connor of RTE. Mm. My dad was, it was me. The play was about me, you know, my dad was in it. And my mum was sitting behind him in the theatre in the project. And she said, "There you are, that's you." And he wasn't a good character, you know. And the field, when I was doing the field and Harris did something wrong. He didn't do something wrong. He was doing a scene in the river. And he dumped them all in the river. And I went, "Great, cut, action, do it again." And he went, looked at me, and he ran up the hill. And I remember Joan Bergen was coming towards him with, like, you know, like a towels. And then I saw the towels flying in the air, and then the tea they were bringing him, that went up the other side. So I ran up the hill after him. I come back, Harris. I ran up after him, and he turned and he looked at me, and he was about 4 feet taller than me, because he was 2 feet naturally taller than me. And I looked at him and I thought, I can't win the argument this side. So I walked around him till I was level with his eyes. And I said, "What's going on? Why are you walking away?" And he kept going. He walked around me. And then I was left here. And then the argument kept going in circles. And then eventually we stopped, and he looked at me and he said, "Any argument you're having with me, you're having with your own father." And I was like, wow, that's good insight, Harris. You know, that's so. So anyway,
was he right?
Of course he was right. But I then thought about it, and I thought, why are there no good fathers in Irish literature? You know, and I started trying to find a good father, and the only one I could think of was Leopold Bloom in Ulysses.
There's Frankie agreeing with you. He's fine. Don't worry about him, Kirsten.
What's that granddad saying? My God. He's on about. So I decided I'd do a story about a good father, which became Giuseppe Conlon. But once I said it to my dad, I said, "What do you think of a story about a good father?" And he'd have his pint in the pub and he'd go, And I got such delight out of his reaction that I would say it to him nearly every time I'd meet him. And I'd say, "I'm working on that story about the good father." I kept it up for like months, you know. And then I made the movie, and I said, you know, it was a huge night in the theatre because it was kind of an angry movie, but it was liberating in the fact that it was honest, you know. So on the night, like, it had a huge reception, and my dad, I looked up, and Pete Postlethwaite was at the back of the theatre, and he told me later he was crying, you know, because what happened was, I said, look, my mum was the prototype for the one mother in My Left Foot, and I know Giuseppe was a great father to Jerry and all, but my dad was the prototype for the way I approached Giuseppe. So he came down, the audience went mad, clapped, and he hugged me, and in my right ear, with the audience out on my left, he said, I love you. And I never had heard him say that, so I pushed him back and looked in his eyes, you know, for like 10 seconds. And I went, okay. And then he was dead 2 weeks later. That's mad.
Kirsten, we're heading in next week to a retrospective of your father's work starting on February the 3rd. Which of his films do you like best and why?
Probably In the Name of the Father for me, you know, and probably for all those reasons. But I actually also love Into the West, which is something my dad wrote and didn't direct, but I would have loved him to direct. I love that one. That's about, you know, two kids on a horse, and we were supposed to go across country on a horse to research it at one point, so that might be why I love it.
And you, Jim, as we head into your retrospective, what's your favourite film yourself?
You know, I love In the Name of the Father, and My Left Foot is an astonishing performance. Like, it's like one of the great performances ever on film, I think, you know. And I like a lot in America, but I don't know if I have a favourite in that way.
It's like saying who's your favourite children.
Yeah.
Well, that would be impossible. But if you had to be remembered for one film alone, for some reason.
I think that's going to be My Left Foot, without a doubt, you know. I mean, it's just, I don't have a choice in that. You know, there's something about a breakthrough moment that's a breakthrough moment, you know.
Finally, you've worked together a few times, the two of you, most notably, I suppose, on In America. Do you like working with him, or is he a hard taskmaster?
Oh, it's desperate. No, it was great in America,
is
you know.
Is he grumpy?
No, not at all. No, I mean, he's exactly like he is here, you know.
Okay, what's his worst point? His worst trait? What's her worst trait?
Stubbornness.
I'd have to say the same.
Okay, that's quite good, actually. Because we're going to end on a piece of music that you both like, The Pogues.
Shane captures that thing, and I think Jem Finer wrote it with him, but he captures that thing that immigrants love, you know, the Irish outside of Ireland, and yet he turned it into something punk. And
we're going to have Fairy Tale in New York, which is what you call. We like Frankie, leave him, don't worry, don't take him out, Kirsten, he's grand. My thanks to both of you, Jim Sheridan, Kirsten Sheridan and the gorgeous Frankie. Of course, we're going to look forward to seeing both of your new films later this year. Kirsten's, yours is called Dollhouse. Jim's, yours is called Dreamhouse. The retrospective next week in the Irish Film Institute here in Dublin, Jim Sheridan Focus, is a season of your films, Jim. It features screenings of 8 of your best known films. There'll be a public interview on the 5th of February where you're going to be interviewed by your brother Peter. And there's a gala launch on February the 3rd with a screening of My Left Foot. Thank you all very much. My thanks on sound today to Sheila Nivoyle, to my producer Eileen Heron. I'll be here at the same time next Sunday. Thank you very much for listening. And now we're going to go out listening to Fairy Tale of New York.
It was Christmas Eve, babe, in the drunk tank.
Miriam meets on RTE Radio 1 with Miriam O'Callaghan.